Good morning, folks. This is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. It is March 30th. This is our weekly agenda. We will start by taking a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bogue, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Hackett.
Here.
Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 out of 7 commissioners present.
Thank you very much. Very good. Welcome, everybody. Good to see everybody. We will now move to commissioner comments. Do commissioners have comments for the good of the cause? Commissioner Hackett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to let folks know many of you have heard that I've accepted a new position at Cdphe as the board administrator for the air quality enterprise and the clean fleet enterprise. And today is my last day as the Cdphe energy liaison. This is definitely a bittersweet moment for me. My time as energy liaison and recently as backup commissioner on the COGCC really has been the honor and the privilege of my life. And I'm grateful for the connections I've made and for the opportunity to collaborate with you all over the years to protect public health and the environment. But I'm also really excited to support the work of these enterprise boards and continue my career over at Cdphe. The energy liaison position, it's been a really good opportunity for me. It's a unique and challenging opportunity, a very impactful and important opportunity at Cdphe. And that position has been posted online. So I encourage folks to apply to that or consider sharing it with your networks. And then just in general, I wanted to express my gratitude for all of my colleagues and friends over at COGCC. From the very first day all the way up and down the chain of command, you've all been thoughtful, determined, and generous with your knowledge. You've accomplished so much over the last several years that I hope you're all proud of, and I'm proud of you. So just wanted to thank you, and thank you for your service to Colorado. And again, thank you for partnership over the years. And I look forward to connecting with some of you in my new role.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hackett. We appreciate We've appreciated your work with us. You've been an important part of the journey over the last several years. And I think that our work product is enhanced by the result of the work that you've done. We wish you all the best. And we also wish all Coloradans that are listening in that if you're interested in the position, please apply and come work with us. So again, thank you very much, Sean. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. Have a good day, everyone.
Anything else? Everybody's waving bye to you. See you soon. All right. With that, we will now move into the rest of our agenda. We start with a consent agenda. Does anyone have questions with regard to consent? Seeing no questions, do we have a motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Hearings Manager Larson, do we now have on our docket the informational presentation on EOR, Enhanced Oil Recovery?
We do, Mr. Chair, and we can bring Mr. John Morgan in, and he will be presenting on behalf of staff on that matter.
Great.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if Mr. Morgan is presenting to us, but he's on mute because I see the slides moving.
I was wondering the same thing. Mr. Morgan, are you, can you unmute yourself?
I found the mute button. Can you hear me, Commissioner?
We can, but we didn't hear you before, so if you could start from the beginning, that would be awesome.
I got that. You sure thing. 1 second. I appreciate. I regret the error there. So thanks for the opportunity to present today. I really appreciate the opportunity, with Chairman Robbins and the rest of the commissioners. So I understood that the ask from the commission was for some background on enhanced recovery units in Colorado as practiced here at the commission. So that's how I've geared this presentation. And we'll begin by talking about the class 2 underground injection control wells, the 2 types of them, the phases of oil production. Secondary recovery is enhanced oil recovery here at the commission. And then I'll entertain any questions you may have after that about the presentation. So underground injection class 2 wells are administered by the United States Safe Drinking Water Act through the Environmental Protection Agency. We have delegated authority to permit and class 2 wells. And what class 2 wells are wells that dispose of class 2 waste, particularly as defined in our 100 series, which is exploration and production waste from oil and gas operations. There are 2 types of class 2 wells. There are disposal wells and enhanced recovery wells. And disposal wells involve the deep injection of produced water from producing oil and gas wells or other authorized E&P waste. And there are also enhanced recovery wells, which are involved in secondary recovery and or tertiary or further recovery of oil and gas from producing reservoirs. So, as mentioned, they're permitted by the Safe Drinking Water Act for the protection of underground sources of drinking water, primarily by ensuring wellbore integrity and isolation of USCWs, and also by authorizing injection by aquifer exemption into only underground formations which cannot be classified as producing either public or agricultural water as defined in the federal statute. And that applies to all class 2 wells, disposal, and enhanced recovery. So let's talk about the phases of oil production. So originally, a reservoir will produce in primary recovery, which can recover up to about 15% of oil in place. Hydrocarbons may flow naturally to the surface due to only virgin reservoir pressure, but that's pretty rare. What's more common is that hydrocarbons are brought to the surface with artificial lift after that natural virgin formation pressure pushes hydrocarbons into a wellbore. And that's where you'll see pump jacks at surface, and there's like a rod in the tubing pulling the oil up and pumping it up to surface. And sometimes operators will use gas lift, which involves injecting gas down the wellbore to mix with the oil and make it more buoyant and lift it to surface that way. Secondary recovery can recover about 40% of oil in place, and this involves injection of water and or gas, primarily carbon dioxide, sometimes natural gas. And this works by displacing hydrocarbons and moving them towards a producing well. Commonly, there's at least one injector and one producer in an enhanced recovery project, and sometimes multiple injectors and producers, and these big, large EOR projects can develop that way. And rarely you can have a single well. We have an allowance for a single well to be both an injector and a producer we refer to this as a huff and puff type operation. So secondary recovery is sometimes referred to as improved oil recovery, but the commission has considered this enhanced recovery since at least the 1950s. It involves both water and gas floods. There's a diagram here outlining it. You'll see, let me actually turn my pointer to a laser here. So on the left, you see an injection well, which would be authorized and permitted, that in this diagram is injecting water into a producing hydrocarbon formation. And since water is immiscible with oil, meaning that they don't mix together and form a solution, that'll push the oil towards this producing well on the right. And then let's talk about tertiary recovery, which is traditionally termed enhanced recovery in the oil and gas exploration business. This is a bit distinct from secondary recovery because in addition to injection of fluids, either gas or water, it also involves introducing a third method into it. So either heat, but altering the hydrocarbons either thermally through heat or steam, or chemically with polymers and microbes or carbon dioxide superfluids. It's predominantly used in fields with very heavy gravity oil, poor permeability, or other impediments for hydrocarbon flow. So here's a couple diagrams of tertiary recovery. The one on the left shows a thermal agent. So they inject steam on the left, which heats up the rock, heats up the fluids in the rock, and then you have a front of hot water, which will again thermally transfer its heat energy over to the oil in the reservoir, which was kind of resistant to flow, and that heat will make it more likely to flow up the producing wellbore on the right. And on the diagram on the right, we see what's called a Wag operation, which stands for water alternating gas. So they inject carbon dioxide and water and carbon dioxide and water alternating. And how this works is that there's originally oil that is resistant to flow. The carbon dioxide that they inject first will mix with the oil and make it more buoyant. And then the water will push that more buoyant oil towards the wellbore that produces on the right. So these phases of oil recovery are all about producing as the most hydrocarbons you can from a reservoir. The diagram on the right is a decline curve, which has time on the x-axis and oil production rate on the y. And typically, a decline curve is you get your most oil right after putting a well or a field or whatever online, and then your rate of recovery declines over time. And then through secondary and tertiary methods, you can extend the time that your life is economic. So a couple notes about the phases of oil production is that EOR is performed in reservoirs with high permeability. Often the reservoir was originally water driven, so water floods work well. It's not typically performed, I don't think at all, in unconventional reservoirs such as tight sands or shale plays. And the big driver in tertiary recovery is increasing the miscibility of the oil. And the overall benefit of it is the economics. So let's talk about how the commission has treated secondary projects historically here. Secondary and tertiary recovery has been treated as enhanced oil recovery. We know this because we have orders authorizing injection for secondary purposes specifically called out in the order. So let's walk through 3 examples of that. Order number 283-1 is in the McCollum Field in Jackson County in the North Park Basin. The producing formation is the Upper Pier B. It involves gas injection for secondary recovery, and this began injection in 1973. Here's a copy of the order. It authorized up to 4 injectors initially, then however many producers and or injectors the operator needed to develop the unit. It authorized secondary recovery by gas injection. Here's a map of how the field looks currently, with producing wells in yellow and injecting wells in the blue triangle, in the blue diamonds, excuse me. This is the black lines are the flow lines transferring carbon dioxide around. So over to the other side of the state in the Rangeley field, it's the Rangeley Weber Sandstone unit in Rio Blanco County. The formation is the Weber Sandstone. This authorized gas injection for secondary recovery, and it began injecting in 1951. Here's a copy of that order, which interestingly enough also had a lawsuit appended to the end of it. But the result of the lawsuit was that the order stood. This authorized secondary recovery by gas injection. And the intent of this order was to keep the reservoir pressure up at a level that would ensure production volumes to multiple operators who are all producing from this field at the time in the 1950s. Currently, this is owned by one, the whole project's owned by one operator. Here's a picture of what the Rangeley Weber Sandstone unit looks like currently. As you can see, this is a very large secondary recovery EOR project, again with injectors and blue diamonds and producers and yellow circles. And lastly, Order 2660 created the Adena D Sandstone unit in Morgan County, which is the D Sandstone of the Cretaceous Dakota Group. This authorized water injection for secondary recovery and began injection in 1990. A copy of the order shows that it specifically authorized the secondary recovery by the injection of water, and the intent was to increase ultimate recovery from the reservoir. A map of it currently, it's not really currently injecting, but we have some wells that are producers shown, and again, yellow circles, injectors in blue diamonds, and injectors that aren't currently injecting in the salmon colored squares around. So this interestingly has a line of injectors on the east, and the design of this project was to take advantage of the geology in the area, where the line of injectors to the east were a little bit up dip, and so it create a pressure front that would push oil down towards the producers out to the west. And they were mindful they didn't want to create any preferential pathways for that pressure from their pressure front right to producing wells. So they also had injectors interspersed through the production wells, and they would turn them off and on over time to not create those sorts of preferential pathways. So those are three illustrations of current secondary recovery projects that are authorized as EOR units in the state. And a few notes about that is that any recovery projects other than primary have been authorized by order historically, definitely including secondary water and gas floods. Tertiary projects would be covered by the initial secondary recovery order, but we feel that tertiary, and as the industry would term it, enhanced methods, that tertiary recovery method where you need heat or chemical or microbial agents or whatever, those would need written approval of the director to alter their current operational practices, we feel. So with that, I would love to entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Gonzalez?
Thanks, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Morgan, for your presentation. I've got a question just about kind of how an EOR project gets planned. I'm curious as to, the the level of, I guess, engineering and work that goes into deciding where, how many, in kind of structurally, where they're placed, the EOR wells versus production wells? Could you have an EOR well or an injection well for that EOR purpose and then subsequently add a production well? Or does it typically come in a case where you've got a production well and then you would then add an injection well to increase that production well's production portfolio, or excuse me, production profile?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Gonzalez. And I'm going to answer like the geologist that I am and say, well, it just depends. Like everything's different everywhere. That's the lovely fact of our heterogeneous Earth. So I think the main point, the way I'd like to answer that would be to say that operators typically have very educated professionals that have if they've had the asset over time, they've developed their own internal and scientific intelligence, if you will, of the reservoir characteristics and their own, probably mini plays within their play. And they would plan their operations accordingly. And if that involved maybe slamming another producer in an area they hadn't had before, well, if they're authorized by order to drill a new producer, they would submit permitting to do that. I guess I definitely want to say that in our 800 series rules, if all of their wells in a big, large EOR project are permitted, and they just want to switch back and forward between which are injecting and which are producing, well, every well that is going to be an injector has to get permitted with UIC permits at least once. But then after it has been, they can flip it back and forward between being a producer or an injector by filing a Form 4 sundry. The main point of that I'm trying to emphasize is that you can't do that without going through the UIC permitting process. You can't just submit a sundry and turn a producer into an injector without us making sure that everything's copacetic according to our rules and policies.
So Mr. Morgan, let me follow up on that. In that case, you would have essentially two permits issued on the same well location for two different purposes, meaning that you would have a well permitted as a production well, as an oil and gas well under a Form 2, and then you would have that same well permitted as a UIC well. And then in order to switch back and forth between its use and associated, I guess, permit, you would just sundry it back and forth. So I guess to bottom line that question again from the beginning is you could have one single well that's permitted two different ways.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's the same for a disposal well, though. That needs that needs to be permitted by 2 and by 31 and 33 forms. So it needs a permit as a well to be drilled. It also needs a UIC permit to be injected anyway. So it's pretty much the same thing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Questions, other questions, Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Morgan, for the presentation. It was very helpful. When we're looking at injection wells, what kind of environmental concerns might we have? And what do we consider when an operator is asking for either an enhanced oil recovery for disposal, the well for disposal or for secondary or tertiary recovery?
So to answer that, I'd say that, permitting any well is a multidisciplinary effort here at the staff level at the commission, as you well understand, I'm sure. So we would have in our environmental and OGLA staff dealing with environmental impacts, surface level. What we do when we permit UIC wells is administer the Safe Drinking Water Act and to protect underground sources of drinking water specifically. And that's what we're doing when we permit UIC Class 2 wells here. And we do that by ensuring mechanical integrity of the injector itself, but also any offset wells that penetrate surface aquifers that are within the area of influence of that permitted injector.
Thank you. It was, it's interesting to me that we're sending things down into the earth, and how do we, how do we know that it's going to stay in that area where you're trying to create a push to move the hydrocarbons in a certain direction? And it's very interesting to me. It's very, I don't know how we know that it doesn't seep somewhere else. And I guess you all are looking at that, so I'm appreciative.
Thank you, Commissioner McGowan.
Not seeing further questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan. We do appreciate your being with us this morning and for the presentation.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the opportunity.
All right, we will continue down our docket. We will now take up docket number 2109-00145, a matter involving mallard exploration. We provide time to bring the applicants to the panel.
And Mr. Chair, we did not have any public comment for this OGDP, so we'll be bringing in the applicant and their panel. Mr. Jason Maxey from Weld County also would like to provide a few comments. I have emailed Mr. Maxey to see if he's available to join us a little early. I haven't heard back, so that's kind of to be determined. We'll be on the lookout for him.
Good morning, Ms. Jost. It looks like we're trying to bring everybody onto the panel.
Sounds good. Good morning, Chair. I believe we may have everyone from Mallard on.
Very good. You are set to go as soon as you're ready to go.
Okay, excellent. I'll just give a brief introduction and then I will share my screen for the presentation. Well, good morning, everyone. Oh,
Ms. Jost, I'm so sorry to interrupt. That was quite rude, but I did just get an email from Mr. Maxey. He is joining us. So Ms. Jost and Mr. Chair Robbins, we can, if we want to give him just a moment, we can bring Mr. Maxey in and he can provide his comments and then we can proceed with Mallard's presentation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Of course, just give us a moment. So Mr. Maxey will be joining as a panelist in just a minute.
Good morning, Mr. Maxey.
Good morning, Commissioner Robbins and Commission. Apologies for that. It's always fun bouncing from one meeting to the next, and appreciate you holding on for just a minute. Let me join in real fast.
No problem. So we're taking up docket 2109-00145, the Eider North Oil and Gas Development Plan. If you would like to present on that OGDP and or WOGLA, we would love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you again very much for the opportunity to be before you for just a few minutes. And again, as mentioned last week, want to try to do a better job about being present at these hearings for locations that are being proposed in unincorporated Weld County, and being available to the commission to answer any type of questions that are or were a part of the Weld County process and consideration. So the Mallard Eider North location has been through the 1041 WOGLA process. We began this process back in 2021, basically the middle of the year in 2021. We did go through the full 1041 process, including the COGCC staff. So there was a pre-application meeting held with this location. COGCC and the CPW were a couple of additional agencies that were involved with this. There was some robust discussion regarding alternate locations on this due to it being within some high priority habitat areas. So the CPW was engaged in that along with the applicant and COGCC staff to talk about those land use type items that could influence the siting for this location. And that was a good meeting that was had on June 30th, 2021. A few months later in September, they submitted their actual application. Everything was found to be compliant, and we held the 1041 application hearing at the end of October. There was no intervention parties on our end, no homeowners. Obviously, in this area is very remote location, kind of up in the northeastern part of Weld County, out by the New Raymer area or close to there, if you know where that's at. So very remote. There are additional oil and gas locations in this area, which lends itself to the siting and the discussion that was had. And basically at the end of the day, the Weld County hearing officer felt that it was a good application, that the discussion on alternate locations was very robust, and that our staff from Weld County worked well with your staff at the COGCC, and that there were not any issues with moving forward and approving this permit as it was submitted. So this one, we would definitely recommend your consideration for approval. And I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding any of the Weld County process that you all might have.
Great, thank you for being here, Mr. Maxey. Questions? All right, we're not seeing questions at this point in time. If you want to hang out, we're going to hear from the applicant, which might facilitate questions. So thank you for being with us. Ms. Jost, I believe you're up.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Robbins. Well, again, good morning, Commissioners, Director Murphy, staff, Mr. Maxey. Thank you for participating today. And also good morning to the members of the public. My name is Jamie Jost from Jost Energy Law, and I, along with my partner, Kelsey Wezelinski, represent Mallard Exploration on this Eider North Oil and Gas Development Plan in docket 2109-00145. As a brief introduction, the proposed Eider North OGDP contains an established drilling and spacing unit for the development of 1,280 acres, with 640 acres of the unit being Colorado State Land Board minerals. This is one new Form 2A before you today for the Eider North pad for the development of 7 wells in the established drilling and spacing unit. There are no Rule 304B2A ALA triggers for this location. It's located in Weld County, as you just heard from Mr. Maxey, and has an approved 1041 WOGLA permit. And there's no residential building unit owners or units within 2,000 feet that would trigger Rule 604. Aaron Matthews, who's the VP of Development for Mallard, and Matt Volkmar, who's the president of Mallard, will testify before you today on behalf of Mallard and this OGDP. Following the presentation, we're happy to answer any questions. And with that, I will share the PowerPoint and turn it over to Ms. Matthews.
Thanks, Jamie. Just waiting to see if the PowerPoint pops up.
There we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, let me put it in presentation mode and we will roll. All right.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. Again, my name is Aaron Matthews, and I'm the Vice President of Development at Mallard Exploration. Next slide, please. And we know the commission has now heard from us quite a few times in the past weeks, but just as a quick reminder, Mallard was founded in 2017, and all of our operations are located in rural Northeast Weld County, focused mainly in the areas between Briggsdale, Keota, and New Raymer. Here's a brief timeline of the project to date. As Mr. Maxey just presented, the local land use permit was approved in November of 2021, and that was a 1041 WOGWA with Weld County. On August 4th, 2021, Mallard submitted this OGDP application. The application was deemed complete in December of 2021. The 30-day public comment period closed on January 8th, 2022, with no comments being received. The petition deadline ended February 14th, 2022, with no petitions filed. And that brings us to today's hearing, which was originally noticed for March 16th. The Eider North pad is located in the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 25, Township 8 North, Range 60 West, in unincorporated Weld County. Generally, the pad is south of Highway 14, east of County Road 105, and west of County Road 390, which is approximately 10 miles west of New Raymer, Colorado. On this map, the yellow circle represents a 1 mile buffer. The Eider North pad is over 1 mile from any residential building unit, municipal boundary, high occupancy building unit, designated outside activity area, school or child care center, or DI community. The Eider North OGDP proposes 7 wells with 5 oil tanks, 5 water tanks, with a disturbed area during construction of 12 acres and a size of location after interim reclamation of 7.5 acres. Mallard originally planned development of this acreage from an approved location known as the Eider pad that was located approximately 1 mile to the south. I would like to note there is a typo on this slide in that the original Eider pad was located in Section 1 of Township 7 North, Range 61 West, and not Section 36 as indicated here. The original location expired in March of 2021 and has been abandoned as Mallard has continued to pursue this OGDP. Compared to the original location, the proposed Eider North pad reduces ground disturbance during construction by 8.3 acres. The location size and interim reclamation is reduced by 5.4 acres. And this application greatly reduces the total number of oil and water tanks. The Eider North location does not trigger any of the alternative location analysis criteria. Highway 14 will be utilized for the haul route to and from the Eider North pad. This greatly reduces dust as well as wear and tear on county roads that are used by residents in the area. And the access permit is approved through CDOT. The surface owner strategically worked with Mallard to locate the Eider North pad along a pre-existing lease road to eliminate new road impact and reduce overall impacts to grazing across the sections in 25 and 26. Additionally, Mallard has a surface use agreement in place with the surface owner, who is a longstanding proponent of natural resource development throughout this area. As Jamie mentioned in the opening statement, the Eider North pad will develop an approved 1,280 acre DSU, shown by the yellow box on this exhibit. The surface location will develop the entire DSU through a combination of 7 wells going to the south. As shown on this exhibit, there is one existing horizontal well, the Rhines 11H, that is producing within the application lands and is operated by another operator and not Mallard. Additionally, the Eider North pad will develop Colorado State Land Board minerals that are leased to Mallard. As you can see in the blue on this exhibit, the minerals of Section 36, 8 North, 60 West are owned by the Colorado State Land Board. And Mallard is currently working with the state land board to finalize a communitization agreement at this time. The Eider North Pad is located outside of the 1202D high priority habitat for the pronghorn winter concentration area. This pad was sited to avoid the HPH, unlike the previously approved pad, which can be seen in this exhibit represented by the blue star. So that's the original Eider pad that I mentioned earlier. The access road and utility corridor for the proposed Eider North Pad will run to the north and therefore also avoids HPH. As Mr. Maxey mentioned, through the local land use permitting process, Mallard, CPW, Weld County, and COGCC staff engaged in a pre-application consultation in June of 2021. Siting of the location was discussed, including the idea of aligning the Eider North Pad adjacent to existing oil and gas pads that are located along the south line of the property, which is also the south line of section 25. In Mallard's discussions with the surface owner, this siting was not supported as the surface owner did not want to create a barrier of oil and gas locations along the southern border of their property. And additionally, CPW expressed concern that moving the location further south would place it within the high priority habitat and would create a wall of oil and gas locations that could ultimately prevent pronghorn migration through the area. Ultimately, CPW and Will County both supported the Eider North siting as it avoids HBH. Here you can see on this exhibit that the Eider North Pad is located outside of the HPH. It's 208 feet to the north. No additional mitigation measures were requested by CPW or Will County during the pre-application consultation. Due to the proximity to HPH, Mallard will implement protective BMPs, including use of Tier 4 quiet fleet completion crews. Electricity will be brought to the location to power the facility, minimizing long-term noise from production equipment. Use warm color lighting with timers and/or motion sensors. Use pipelines for oil, gas, and water takeaway. Any fencing used will use CPW recommended fence designs. And for all reclamation purposes, CPW recommended seed mix for pronghorns will be used. At this time, Mallard anticipates starting development at the Eider North Pad in January of 2023. 10 months of continuous operations consisting of drilling, completion, and flowback would result in the wells being online in October of 2023. This proposed timeline is dependent on external factors such as rig and frac crew availability, equipment supply chain, and third-party pipeline connects. And operations would begin with pad construction. The existing topography at this location has slopes of about 1 to 5%, which will require nominal cuts and fills to construct the pad. Stormwater controls consisting of cut swales and earthen berms will be constructed around the location to direct and control stormwater. Per Weld County 1041 WOGLA and drainage regulations, this location will be constructed with a designed detention pond that is sized for the 100-year storm event. To ensure the protection of the surface and groundwater, the location will be plated with aggregate road-based material that is compacted to deter spills from easily seeping into the soil. This also helps minimize dust and wind erosion. Additionally, to minimize dust, water will be available and can be applied to the pad and access road as needed. And as mentioned previously, any stockpiles and cut and fill slopes will be stabilized with pronghorn seed mix and mulch upon completion of construction. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Matt.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Commissioners and audience, I think you're getting very familiar with a lot of our mitigation measures and technology over the past couple of weeks. So I've expanded a few of these bullet points based on the discussion in the past, and we'll generally just kind of touch on some high level points here and elaborate on some of the new detail. So these technology mitigation measures across our drilling operations are pretty consistent, but I did just want to touch here on the Cdphe air permit process, as a lot of our discussion has gone into emissions. So essentially under the Cdphe air permit, there's a general permit a active air monitoring plan. So the general air permit basically estimates, records, catalogs, and reports all of our emissions throughout the drilling, completion, flowback, and life of production phases, and essentially accounts for that against what the permit was designed for, and ultimately make sure that we stay under those limitations. And then secondly, which is a relatively new operation, is the active air monitoring. So this is essentially monitoring primarily for VOCs during the big rig drilling process, during completions, flowback, and initial production phases. So we're looking for any elevated VOCs that might be recorded, and essentially having any kind of intervention should anything be reported for any kind of active duration. Now, under our current operations, we do have a drilling rig and completion crew in process on different DSUs. We haven't had any reports needing intervention at this time. Next slide, please. Again, here we've got a lot of our completion and flowback technology and mitigation measures listed, but did want to touch a bit more on our Tier 4 quiet fleets. And Tier 4 technology, as our discussion has kind of gone that direction. So again, Tier 4 is a high horsepower engine emission technology. So that's going to apply to big rigs, and obviously our engines that power our generators on the drilling rig, and especially on the completion side. So the Tier 4 technology results in significant emission reductions, CO2, NOx, and particulate matter. But as you can see here, the reductions are most significant on your NOx and your particulate matter. And just as an illustration, you can kind of see 2 frac crews running at full throttle in a Tier 2 scenario and a Tier 4. So that kind of gives you a visualization of what that really means. And then on the quiet fleet side, you can look at this in more detail on Liberty's website, but essentially it's a 3-fold noise reduction across all the frequencies. And specifically that amounts to a 20 plus dBc reduction. And dBCs are kind of your low frequency vibration, where, that's where most of your noise comes from a frac crew. So you're seeing over 20 decibel reduction based on that quiet fleet technology. Next slide, please. Production infrastructure, just want to remind everyone that our facilities are completed before our wells are brought to flowback. They are electrified, and we do have pipeline committed from day one. Another issue I wanted to touch on here is just kind of the discussion around tankless facilities, as I know that's kind of a major talking point these days. And as Aaron mentioned, we've got 5 oil tanks, 5 water tanks here, and these wells produce a significant volume of oil and water, especially in their early time production. And essentially this volume runs through our separators, which are over 99% efficient, but you still ultimately end up with a less than 1% mix of kind of oil and water that comes out on the backside of the separators. Now, in order for us to get into our pipelines, to simplify it, essentially water can't go into the oil pipeline and the oil can't go into the water pipeline. So this little bit of tankage allows us a little bit of residual settling time for that last less than 1% of oil and water to separate out, so that at that point they can go in, that volume can go into the pipeline. Without that extra settling time, without those tanks, we would have difficulty utilizing our pipeline if we had any specification that didn't quite meet those pipelines. So, tanks are actually a benefit here in that the long term they let us utilize pipeline 100% of the time versus having any water or oil volumes that don't quite meet spec. So next slide, please. So this is summarizing some of the earlier stuff that Aaron mentioned, but to summarize cumulative impacts, we're over 1 mile from the nearest building unit, municipal boundary, high occupancy building unit, child care facility, school, or DI community. We're just outside the priority habitat, as you saw. We're 2,000 feet away from the nearest public road, and we're utilizing Highway 14. Overall disturbance, tankage, acreage is significantly reduced, and we're utilizing local contractors, vendors, and service companies as much as possible. We did have a question that came in during the preliminary review regarding our cumulative impacts report. So the question was surrounding existing wells and plugging or remediation. So as part of the permitting process, we evaluate all wells previously plugged or producing today that are within 1,500 feet. And based on the additional pads that you can see here on this map and just kind of some history of the area, there were 46 wells identified. Now, most of those are modern wells or have been remediated previously, but we do have 5 additional wells that we will be re-entering to replug just to ensure that there's adequate protection between the producing reservoirs and the shallow aquifers. And those will all be included on the HOP spreadsheet, which is, well, all 46 of them are identified, but the specific 5 wells are identified and given a plan essentially as to how they will be replugged or remediated before we begin our completion process. So if there's any additional questions there, obviously we can touch on it further at the end. Next slide, please. To summarize, the Eider North OGDP is recommended for approval by the director. It's protective of public health, safety, welfare of the environment, and wildlife resources. It doesn't trigger any ALA criteria and avoids high priority habitat. It's supported by Weld County, and Mallard is committed to best practices to avoid, minimize, and mitigate potential impacts to the public health, safety, welfare, and environment, wildlife resources. Thank you for your time today, and would like to open for any questions or comments that the commission may have. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. This time, I will look to fellow commissioners with any questions. The lack of questions illustrates it's pretty straightforward, I think. This time, do commissioners desire to move into deliberations? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah, Chair, I'll kick it off. I don't have anything to add or really, I don't have any questions in this regard. Pretty straightforward, comfortable with the application, and I would be comfortable making a motion to approve this application.
I will take that as a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
The motion and a second. Do we have any questions? I agree with you, Commissioner Gonzalez. I think this is pretty straightforward. I think that the applicant did a good job of complying with our requirements. Appreciate that we heard from Weld County and their OGLA process, which is an important criteria. Also note this is a matter that is endorsed by the State Land Board. It's developing State Land Board minerals, which is important for the state of Colorado. So with that, I'm going to be a favorable vote as well. Any further deliberations? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the statements that you had made on this. I will also note that having read through the WOGLA hearing minutes that were provided in the application, I thought that was very informative to me, and will note that their requirement of having an alternative location analysis, even if it's doesn't meet some of the COGCC requirements for alternative location analysis, was super helpful for me to read through and understand the process for determining this particular site, and certainly encourage applicants to highlight that in their applications, even if it's not required in our regulations, because that helped me review this particular application and alleviate any concerns I had about a particular location. So I'll also vote in support of this application.
Further deliberations? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to the panel for the presentation.
Yes, thank you, commissioners.
I believe we will now move to our next docket 2107-00117. We do need to bring everyone to the table for this presentation. Let's go ahead and get started with that.
Chair Robbins, I believe we have everyone in from Bonanza Creek.
Very good. Ms. Jost, do you know whether we were to hear from Mr. Maxey on this one?
I believe he was scheduled on the agenda. Yes.
Then following our normal protocol, we will hear from Mr. Maxey first.
Okay, thank you again, Chair Robbins and COGCC Commission and staff for allowing me to take a few minutes at the beginning of this hearing just to provide some local input from our process. Again, this is for the Bonanza Creek State Antelope B2 pad, and very similarly to the prior docket item that you all just heard, this location also did go through the full 1041 WOGLA process with Weld County and our staff specialist who handled the permit. And I just do want to acknowledge and thank Commissioner Messner for the comments regarding the WOGLA information being included in your packet for your review, and the acknowledgement that has been helpful to commission staff as well as to the commissioners, because we want to be obviously very transparent and partner with you all to provide all the information that is pertinent for your decision as well. So very similarly to the prior docket item, this is another remote location. We did hold a pre-app meeting. And again, we take a look at all the what we believe is the relevant jurisdictions that should be or need to be involved in the pre-app meeting. I'll just start off by saying again and reiterate the fact that these pre-app meetings are literally foundational to the process of the local government review of the permits that are in front of us. And I believe that they have provided huge benefit to the COGCC staff and their review of the permit as well. And I'm going to highlight one very critical point to that pre-app meeting that was impactful to this location. But that pre-app meeting was held on April 14th, and it did include our staff, COGCC staff, Bonanza Creek staff, CPW, and in this case, it also did include the Colorado State Land Board. So they had representation at this pre-application meeting as well. The actual application was received at the end of July, and we held our hearing at the end of September 2021. The final order was not recorded until mid-October, so it took a couple weeks to get documents finalized and recorded, but it was recorded. And all that information, again, as Commissioner Messner mentioned earlier, should be included in your packet. Some of the information, unfortunately, we're still working through a little bit of those technical glitches, but I do want to give a shout out again to Sabrina and Chris for helping work through those items and getting these comments uploaded again. And that has been has been solved now. So moving forward, we shouldn't have the deletion of our comments on these docket items for you. But what I want to mention real fast about the pre-app meeting, just so that you all know, is that I believe that this is a excellent example about how even if the location does not trigger an alternate location analysis with COGCC rules, as Commissioner Messner pointed out for the prior location that was just heard, we still talk about alternates at our pre-application meeting. And what that does is that raises to the surface certain questions from other jurisdictions or even the applicant about alternate locations. So even though it's not maybe a requirement, that pre-application meeting helps talk about and identify other potential alternates, even if it's not a rule requirement. And this is a prime example of that, because when we received the pre-application request and held the pre-application meeting, it's documented in our official notes that are again shared with the COGCC and all attendees, that the COGCC acknowledged the fact that this did not require an alternate location analysis. However, we were talking with the applicant about potential consolidation. Instead of a brand new surface disturbance, why could this new location not be consolidated right next to an existing oil and gas location? And in fact, when they moved through to the other stages of the WOGLA process, that is what the applicant did. And that's why I say that the pre-app meeting is foundational to moving forward through the other steps of not only the WOGLA process, but also the OGDP process with the state, because the applicant in this case was a full partner in those discussions, even though they didn't have to based on the rules. And consolidation and cumulative impacts was one of the things that were talked about and that they listened to. And they revised their plan from the pre-application meeting to the application stage that we considered and that you all have in front of you. And this is a consolidated location. And so I think that that plays in heavily into our determination, as well as what you all are considering right now. So I just wanted to highlight that and say that these pre-application meetings work, and that they are definitely, the operators are listening to the questions and comments that are coming out of them, and they're incorporating them into their applications. And so again, I'd be happy to answer any questions you all might have as far as the local permitting process, but we would definitely recommend that you all consider approval of this as well, and say thank you again for your staff's involvement in the Weld County process, because it truly is helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maxey, for the presentation. Questions? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Maxey. I did have a couple of questions. So this particular application incorporates kind of a unique stacking of drilling and spacing units that I think staff has highlighted. You know, it could, well, not against the rules, could potentially be challenging as far as addressing correlative rights and royalty payments and determination of all that. I don't think that's a part of your WOGLA review, but I just thought I'd ask you about that and see if there was any discussions in the WOGLA process about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner, and you are exactly right. The subsurface areas that are associated with these developments, while they definitely are very important to the entire process, that is not anything that Weld County really dives too deep into. We do take a look at the development area or the drilling and spacing unit that is provided within the WOGLA application, because inherently having to know that subsurface area that they're planning to extract minerals from is very impactful regarding siting around that window. But as far as diving into the facts of the matter, as far as who has what mineral interest rights and such, that is something that we completely defer to the COGCC on, and we might have some very high level questions regarding that window, but we do not do a very deep dive or analysis into that information.
Okay, I didn't think you did. That's the only question I have. Thank you.
Further questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Maxey. Appreciate you being with us. Stick around and we will now hear from the applicant.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Right. Chair, are you seeing my screen?
We are seeing your screen, and Ms. Jost, following along the lines of Commissioner Messner's question, if you could ensure that your presentation speaks to the use of the DSUs in sort of an atypical relic sort of fashion, and how maybe you're not going to do that down the road, and how this one is atypical. If you could speak to those sorts of things, I think that would be helpful. I know those are areas in which commissioners have.
Happy to. Thank you, Chair, for that. And we are definitely prepared to discuss that because this is a unique setup. So again, thank you and good morning, commissioners, Director Murphy, COGCC staff, Mr. Maxey, and members of the public. My name is Jamie Jost, and with Jost Energy Law, and I, along with my partner, Kelsey Weselinki, are representing Bonanza Creek Energy Operating LLC on this state antelope oil and gas development plan before you this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you, and we look forward to our discussion. As a brief introduction, the proposed state antelope OGDP is seeking 5 new drilling and spacing units under the new mission change rules to be developed by 1 established oil and gas location that's currently home to 8 producing wells. As you will hear from Mr. Meyer, and I'm happy to address this as well as part of the question and answer session, but this OGDP is an infill development project. So what that is that Bonanza has carefully navigated the old rules, if you will, the old wellbore spacing rules of 318A and the new drilling and spacing rules that were in effect after January 15th, 2021 with our mission change. And so what they've done is they've utilized this existing location to comply with Rule 603 and to avoid significant surface disturbance from a new location. Bonanza Creek is seeking to expand the existing state antelope pad for multi-well development. So there is no new oil and gas location saw as part of this OGDP. The state antelope pad is located on Colorado State Land Board surface. There's an existing SUA with the State Land Board, and the drilling and spacing units will develop fee and a significant amount of Colorado State Land Board minerals as part of this 5 DSU proposed today. The State Land Board is supportive of this OGDP application. There are no Rule 304B2A ALA criteria that trigger an ALA analysis. And there are no RBUs within 2,000 feet, so Rule 604 does not apply. You will hear a variety of topics today, and Chair, to your point, and Commissioner Messner, to your original question, we will hit on the technical support for the drilling and spacing units as we get to Bennett Meyer's presentation in slides 18 through 21. And we do have Bennett Meyer, Nathan Bennett, and Kathy Stearman. They will be providing the presentation and testimony in support of the state antelope OGDP this morning. We also have a number of subject matter experts on hand as well. We have Mr. Schroeder, Mr. Marshall, and Mr. Schultz if needed for any questions. With that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Bennett Meyer.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Bennett Meyer, and I'm the senior landman responsible for the state antelope OGDP. Since this is Bonanza's first OGDP in front of the commission, we thought it'd be helpful to confirm the Bonanza Creek Energy Operating LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of Cdphe Resources. Bonanza does remain the operator of the state antelope location and does maintain all financial assurances, insurance, and its operator clearance with the commission. Slide, please. So this slide highlights some of the general facts about the state antelope location. The state antelope B2 is an existing location located in section 2 of 5 North 62 West in Weld County. As Mrs. Jost alluded to, this is 11 new wells proposed from the existing state antelope location and will complete an infill development program for 5 drilling and spacing units that are infilling 8 existing horizontal wells that were previously approved under the old Rule 318A wellbore spacing unit rule. As Jamie also alluded to earlier, and as you can see from the map on the right, The State Antelope OGDP intends to infill and develop the remaining well locations within the application lands. Just as a note, Bonanza does have an approved permit, and as you heard from Mr. Maxey, from Weld County, and the State Antelope location is not within 2,000 feet of any residential building units, is not in high priority habitat, not in a floodplain, and is not in a disproportionately impacted community. The State Antelope location also did not meet the criteria to conduct an alternative location analysis and did not receive any public comment on the alternative location analysis. I will reiterate Mr. Maxey's comments during the WOGO process. Again, we did look at a few different locations, even though we were not required to, and ultimately settled on reoccupying this existing location to limit cumulative impacts. So just wanted to highlight that. And next slide, thank you. Just a brief timeline. Bonanza submitted the State Antelope OGDP on July 16th, 2021. Bonanza received approval of its local government permit on October 11th, 2021. And then we received our completeness determination in December of 2021 and mailed the required notices in January of this year, and also received no objections to this application. Next slide, please. As you've heard from Mr. Maxey, the WOGO process was initially initiated in April of 2021 when Bonanza held its pre-application consultation with Weld County, and the WOGO permit was approved on October 11th, 2021. Just a brief anticipation timing of development. So Bonanza anticipates starting construction in July of this year, with drilling to start in September of this year, and completions tentatively scheduled for March of next year, and anticipating first production in the second quarter of next year. Upon approval of this OGDP, Bonanza will be filing the corresponding Form 2s in order to keep this process moving forward. And with that, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Nathan Bennett.
Thank you, Bennett. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Nathan Bennett, and I am the manager of well and location permitting with Civitas Bonanza Creek. Given the remote nature of the State Antelope B2 location, Bonanza requested lesser impact area exemptions pursuant to Rule 304D for both the noise mitigation plan and light mitigation plan requirements. Bonanza believes that it is unlikely that potential impacts from noise and light pose any concern on nearby receptors, including residential building units in high priority habitat. The director granted Bonanza's lesser impact area exemption requests on December 10th, 2021. The State Antelope B2 is an existing location where additional wells will be added to avoid constructing a new location. In addition to the BMPs associated with the existing location, Bonanza will employ additional BMPs, including the use of impervious plastic liners during drilling and completions operations, secondary containment around separators, robust stormwater controls around the perimeter of the location, SCADA systems for around-the-clock monitoring and remote shut-in capabilities, and access road BMPs, including dust control, and in accordance with the State Land Board's SUA requirements. Bonanza will utilize pipeline takeaway for oil, natural gas, and water. Produced fluids will be piped to Bonanza's existing central processing facility, which is located to the southeast of the State Antelope B2 pad. Natural gas flow lines will tie into the Bronco gathering system that is located immediately west of the B2 location. All pipeline infrastructure will be constructed and ready for service prior to the initiation of production from the 11 new wells. Bonanza did receive a commissioner question in regards to assessing existing offset wells for plugging and abandonment. As part of the Form 2 permitting process, Bonanza will perform an offset well evaluation in accordance with the horizontal offset policy and the requirements of Rule 308B7. In general, this area of the basin has few legacy wells relative to what exists in other portions of the field. Therefore, it is possible that the evaluation may determine that no action is required. I will now turn the presentation over to Kathy Stearman.
Thanks, Nathan. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Kathy Stearman, and I'm the manager of air compliance and engineering for Civitas. The State Antelope B2 well development has the advantage of location. Therefore, this well site will be what we call a tankless development, meaning the oil and water will be produced to an already existing central processing facility called State Antelope 01, which is about 1.5 miles to the southeast. This allows us to develop this well pad without adding on-site permanent storage tanks for water or oil. Also worth noting, the existing central processing facility that will receive the oil and water production from State Antelope B2 is already constructed with a tank vapor recovery unit, which recovers tank emissions for beneficial use. In addition to the benefit of local infrastructure, this well pad will also undergo pre-production, production, and early production ambient air monitoring. And one unique point to mention on this development is that the air monitors are already at the central processing facility. They were installed January 2022. Group 2 mud will be used to reduce aromatics and odors, and as per Colorado Regulation 7, all pneumatics will be actuated with instrument air. I will now hand the presentation back to Bennett.
Thank you, Kathy. So as we've mentioned, in conjunction with this application, Bonanza is seeking 5 drilling and spacing units, and we wanted to touch on a few items to support that request. From the land standpoint, Bonanza holds at least 60% or more leasehold in each of the DSUs. The minerals are fee and state, and as previously stated, the surface is owned by the State Land Board, and Bonanza does have an existing SUA with the State Land Board. So I've included 2 maps on this slide to help address the unique layout of the DSUs requested in this OGDP application. As was mentioned previously and as depicted in the upper right map, this OGDP contemplates infill development that constitutes a meshing of old COGCC Rule 318A development that view the gray wells running west to east in section 2, and the new OGDP DSU development sought in this application, which are the new green wells. Bonanza originally planned the State Antelope location expansion as 11 wellbore spacing units under the old Rule 318A, but has combined wellbore spacing units to create these DSUs where possible. And as depicted in the map on the bottom right, it's the anticipated layout as depicted and as requested in this OGDP application. I will also comment that correlative rights will be protected in each DSU, as each interest owner will receive their proportionate share of production revenue from each of the respective DSUs. From the geologic standpoint, the Niobrara Formation will be targeted for development, which is approximately 220 feet thick, is a common source of supply, and is continuous under the OGDP lands. From the engineering standpoint, there will be 7 wells in DSU number 1, and there will be 1 well in each of the remaining 4 DSUs, with each well anticipated to be estimated at 4,500 feet in length. The engineering testimony illustrates an estimated drainage area of 80 acres per well, with a half length of 316 feet, which is less than the requested 330 feet setback in the OGP application. To summarize the presentation today and Bonanza's requested relief, Bonanza believes the State Antelope oil and gas location is the most protective location of the public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. And the Form 2A includes thoughtful and comprehensive best management practices crafted to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to the community and the environment. The State Antelope OGDP has the support of Weld County via the approved local government permit and the support of Director Murphy as set forth in her recommendation for approval. Bonanza respectfully requests approval from the Commission on the State Antelope OGDP. And with that, Civitas, Bonanza, and Joost Energy Law sincerely thank this commission, the COGCC director and staff, and Weld County for their hard work on this application. Thank you.
Thank you to the panel for the presentation. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about the overlapping drilling and spacing units, because I'm not sure I got enough information to fully understand it. And what I'm reading in the staff report was that although the spacing does comply with the applicable COGCC rules, staff strongly prefers that the overlapping DSUs not be utilized if a single DSU would more efficiently develop the minerals. It goes on to say, specifically in the case of DSUs 3 and 4, a single well is being used to develop a DSU much larger than the anticipated radius of hydraulic fracturing and fluid communication, and it is unlikely these single wells will fully develop the DSU's minerals when some of those minerals are over 1,000 feet away from the well bore. So I wonder if you could speak more specifically to that so that I better understand how you intend to address that.
Yeah, Commissioner Messner, thank you for the question. And we appreciate this because we recognize this is a unique OGDP to come in front of you because again, it's an expansion of a location, but it's mainly focused on the 5 DSUs. And as Bennett Meyer stated, if we still had the ability to do wellbore spacing units as operators had prior to January 15th, this would have resulted in overlapping wellbore spacing units under the old rule. Because we don't have that ability and we want to ensure that we are proceeding under the new rules with respect to drilling and spacing units, what Bonanza tried to do here is to establish not 11 drilling and spacing units that technically probably could have been filed, but to condense those drilling and spacing units in such a way so that they still captured the amount of acreage that was intended to be developed with this infill program with the least amount of drilling and spacing units. So when you see drilling and spacing units 1 through 5, and there are overlaps of those, the intention is to, yes, collect as many hydrocarbons and produce as much as you can there in this infill project, but to also keep it, I guess I would say, as simple as possible. So we didn't have 11 drilling and spacing units coming to you that were basically just wellbore spacing units from the past. We talked to staff on this. We worked with staff. We recognize there's a preference from staff and the commission that you don't have these overlapping drilling and spacing units. But in this instance, and you saw the development from the other gray wells, I would say, that were already there, this is kind of the configuration that Bonanza came up with in order to ensure it was putting in wells that was able to produce as much as possible. I think one of the other additions to the question is we recognize that some of these units are larger than what may be drained from a well. Drilling and spacing units can be increased in the future, right? We can come in and ask for additional increased density if needed at a given point in time, pursuant to the commission regulations. So because there's one in there right now, that doesn't mean that there may not be more in there in the future. And I do want to go ahead and just hit on the correlative rights aspect, if that's okay, Commissioner Messner. Okay. I think, and recognizing that there was a comment in the director's recommendation about, and I just want to make sure I'm stating it properly, that the complexity makes the protection of correlative rights difficult for staff to determine and the verification of payment of proceeds more difficult for mineral owners. We have common ownership in these drilling and spacing units. So I think that helps. If there was a diverse breakdown of ownership here, we may, probably be having a different conversation. But because we have very common ownership with the state land board minerals in the entirety of Section 2, and then 3 leases that cover the drilling and space, the 5 drilling and spacing units in a varying capacity, the mineral interest owners are common here. And so they will receive their proportionate share of their production of revenue from each of the 5 drilling and spacing units. And the royalty owners, again, they are common interest. And so the delineation of who should get paid what is actually not a huge concern for purposes of these DSUs, because each royalty owner will be paid out from the production revenues on each drilling and spacing unit. And each drilling and spacing unit has that common ownership. So I'll kind of stop there. I hope that helps a little bit, and happy to continue to walk through if you have additional questions. But we recognize the unique nature of this infill project.
Mr. Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate the explanation to help me better understand the reason why and how it's going to be addressed. I think Chairman Robbins had indicated that perhaps this was a one-off and there was no intent to do it like this again. I mean, is that what I'm hearing from the operator?
So, yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So we do have, Bonanza does have another pending OGDP that we're going to be talking to the state to. We have worked with Sabrina Trask and we're in the process of setting up a meeting with the state. We can't say this won't happen again because of how Bonanza's assets are located in already developed infill areas. We may need to come to you again, but again, we recognize the concerns. We recognize the questions that have come up. And so we as Bonanza are already in the process of working with staff on the pending OGDP at this point in time. And yeah, I think one of the other things too, I just want to point out, Commissioner Messner, is that we may, and I say we as a whole, but there may be other operators that come to the state with these types of infill projects because of how GWA, and specifically in the core of GWA, has been developed on these wellbore spacing units. And again, trying to mix those old rules with the new rules. So we can't say we won't, be back in front of you with another project like this. But again, we're working with staff to address any concerns before they come to you.
Okay, thank you for that. I do have another question. As we talk about some of the gray lines that were on some of the slides, I had read in the WOGLA hearing that Mr. Neighbors indicated that state antelope 11-2HZ and state antelope 11-14-1HZ will most likely be plugged and the sites reclaimed. Is that true? Is that the plan for this particular area?
And I'm going to turn that over to either Mr. Bennett or Mr. Meyer to address.
Thank you, Commissioner Messner. As I stated in my testimony, we will undertake the offset well evaluation process as part of our APD permitting. I recognize the statements that Mr. Neighbors had made during the WOGLA hearing. And while those are very true, and that is very possible, we have not yet finalized that offset well evaluation. So there is a chance that those two wells could potentially remain as part of this project. I stress again that evaluation is ongoing, has not yet been finalized, but we're aware of the potential that those wells could be plugged and abandoned accordingly.
Okay, so not for sure in this application, but something that'll be considered. I think my last question, and this is just a general question, is understanding, particularly in Weld County, where they have an oil and gas review process, and oftentimes I'm seeing the requirements put forth for certain noise standards. Typically, it's NL4 for pre-production, and then NL1 for production as far as noise standards go. And I think in the WOGLA process and then the permit, it's requiring no permanent lighting for this particular operation. I guess just a general question, why not submit those as substantially equivalent to a noise plan or a lighting plan rather than asking for an exemption from the state level? Because I do think that there's standards that the local government's providing that, would be helpful to include in the application to COGCC.
Yeah, and I'm happy to address that, Commissioner Messner. Recognizing your comments, the substantially equivalent Rule 604 it doesn't apply here because
it's in the noise standards in the rules that it does allow for a local government or to have a substantially similar or substantially equivalent requirement. So I'm not speaking to 604 specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I think that's Mr. Bennett, do you want to answer that question, or I'm happy to continue as well?
No, thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Commissioner, for your question. Quite simply, I think we've all learned a lot over the course of the last 12 months or so relative to the expectations of Weld County in a changing environment as they've updated their WOGO requirements, and perhaps more importantly, expectation of staff as well as the commissioners as it relates to the OGDP application process. When you keep in mind that a lot of the guidance and perhaps suggestions, as you assert here, are relatively new, it's certainly something that we will contemplate in future submittals and make an attempt to do just that. And by that, I mean, refer to substantially equivalent information that may have been provided to the local government or governments, as the case may be in some instances, and do our best to incorporate that in our state filings as well. So point well taken, and thank you for the suggestion.
I appreciate that, because then that aids to, I think, just having that local requirements and the state requirements having as closely aligned as possible to not have any confusion. So I would appreciate that. So that's all the questions I have. Thank you for answering my questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Further questions? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to the applicant for their presentation today. I don't really have a question so much as I have a comment to kind of follow up on some of the DSU stuff. And I think it's important that we look back at the history of this, and I think Ms. Jost touched on it a little bit, but really the complexity with infill drilling and infill spacing and overlapping DSUs or spacing units in general kind of was created, many years ago, 2007, 2008 with the original 318A, then updated 2010, 2011 timeframe with the horizontal additions to 318A. But really with that complexity, it exists throughout the DJ Basin, right? And throughout anywhere that had the bounds of the original 318A infill drilling kind of field rule. So we're going to see this, right? And we haven't seen it in terms of horizontal wells overlapping with other horizontal DSUs so much in our applications, but we certainly haven't probably peered deep enough to look at the underlying spacing of vertical wells where the same kind of overlap exists with other OGDPs that we've had before us. So I do want to acknowledge that this complexity has existed for a number of years. And when an operator is planning how they are orchestrating their DSUs, how they're putting them together, which DSUs are deciding to consolidate and which they're not, there's not always consensus or full agreement with the permitting team in that regard. And that's not to say that either is right or wrong. There's a lot of difference in terms of preference, interpretation, and application of it. I do want to say all that and then follow it with my comment that I do think that where consolidation is available, that an operator tries to consolidate those DSUs, right? The fewer instances of overlap, the better, the less confusion, the less complex. But I think that goes hand in hand with an acknowledgement that the complexity exists and has existed for quite some time. So I kind of wanted to throw that out there, make sure that everyone understood that who's listening, and clarify that for my own benefit as well, to make sure that we're not only that we understand what we're asking for, but also acknowledging what the current situation is as well. So that's my comment on that, Chair. I appreciate for the time on that.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Other questions, comments from commissioners? Commissioner McGowan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions. I think for me, I'm appreciative that there was further explanation of common mineral ownership that hopefully helps alleviate kind of the questions around making sure that everyone's correlative rights are protected. And then I was appreciative that all the liquids are being piped off, which I think helps from an emissions perspective and an impact perspective, which I thought was compelling about this application as well.
Thank you for those comments. I echo the thought that the common ownership does make this more palatable for sure. I mean, again, I think it meets the rules But that is helpful as we think through this. I think we're done with comments. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the, oh, heck, I forgot the name of it. The State Antelope B2 pad OGDP.
Second.
Motion and a second. Do we have further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's take our morning break. It is 10:36. Let's return at 10:50. That'll give us about 14 minutes. And then we will, at that time, take up the TEP matter. And then, commissioners, just to give you insight, we will, after TEP, we will take our lunch break because the operator for the last one on our agenda is only available this afternoon. So just FYI. See ya in 13 minutes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Restart our agenda. We will take up docket 2112-00238. This is TEP Rocky Mountain LLC, and it is the federal 299-23-3 OGDP. I see that we have Mr. Jewell with us. Good to see you again. I believe the floor is yours, Ms. Amaro. Do we have any public comment on this? I don't believe we have any public comment on any of them, so just for the record. No public comment. So, Mr. Jewell.
Thank you, Chair Robbins. And if I may, Ms. Amaro or Mimi, if we can get Jeff Kirtland also to get rolled in here as a panelist, that'd be great.
We'll look to hearings manager Amaro at this point to try to bring in Mr. Kirtland. There we go.
Good morning, commissioners.
Rock and roll. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Commissioners, Chair, good morning. Had to scratch out of my notes. Good afternoon. So I'm glad we're making good time and pace here. I'm Michael Jewell with Jewell Jimerson Natural Resources Law on behalf of TEP Rocky Mountain LLC, which is up to date on its financial assurances and intends to remain that way. There's something that almost feels natural about this transition from rulemaking to these core type of applications. So thank you very much for your time and the hard work that's all gone into it. It's a welcome transition as we apply the mission change rulemaking here. We're presenting you today on docket number 211-200-238, somewhat creatively named the Federal 299-233 Oil and Gas Development Plan. This application asks you to approve an approximate 281.54 acre OGDP, consisting of approximately 4.1 acres of surface land, including 2.36 acres of existing disturbance, so only 1.82 acres of new disturbance. The balance of that essentially comes to the amount of pore space that we anticipate being taken up by this singular federal injection well that is going to be drilled, completed, and operated for the disposal of produced water from our existing and future natural gas wells in our Ryan Gulch and Barkus Creek development areas. It'll be located in section 23, northwest southwest of Township 2 South, range 99 west, 6 p.m. So a bit of a mouthful there, but we note that we come before you with no protest, and that's not only formal protests here, but nor have we received to our offices any other stakeholders that we would feel like we would need to disclose. So we're proud of that. And before we get too far along, we want to wish Dave Cabesco, John Morgan, the rest of your technical staff for their insight and feedback during this development. It's been a long time coming and a lot of collaborative work with all those key players. So we just are very thankful for their help and contribution. And thank you all for your kind attention, because we're moving from maybe a more traditional feeling OGDP, where it's the drilling of wells for the production of oil and gas. And this is more of a necessary side addition that helps those other types of developments. So a little bit different from that aspect. So despite the fact that this OGDP would appear to be of lower drilling impact than most, and well, it certainly is. It represents the terminus of a closed loop system for much of TEP's operations in Rio Blanco County. It's a system that Terra proudly believes presents concrete steps not only toward more efficient and economical operation, but also, and more importantly, brings public health, safety, welfare, the environment, wildlife resources into tight focus. But before that, we want to address, so why do we choose this location? And as the name suggests, the federal 229233 OGDP will service federal leases on federal lands. You've heard a state before in different contexts, but in no less part here. This program enjoys 2 levels of the highest oversight from 2 of the most professional governing agencies in the BLM and the COGCC. To that end, we enjoy the approval and support from the BLM, both at the field office and state office levels. We've consulted with them, with the BLM rather, on the governing resource management plans and NEPA. We've also compared knowledge and experience with field staff to cover every facet of federal concern. Important to note, though, the original APDs that were filed for this location triggered a NEPA review, which actually led to the identification of this second place location back at the time to avoid sage grouse buffer areas. So it's safe to suggest the BLM is supportive of this federal OGDP, since it will service those federal wells relating to a larger federal managed unit, and using existing disturbance is a real win-win. But we recognize the burden is ours and ours alone to look at all the impacts to public health, safety, welfare, environment, and wildlife resources. So we'll transition to that highlight here. This OGDP is part of, again, a larger closed system that cradles water for use, recycles and reuses that water many times, and safely disposes that same water after it's been leveraged, so that fundamentally E&P waste for TEP's federal operations continues to be safe, predictable, and manageable. The good management of E&P waste is, on its face, a good public health practice. But secondarily, as we will unpack in more detail in future OGDP applications, one that will come before you next week, this is part of a larger, more comprehensive program to reduce net emissions and utilize the most innovative technology commitment to air that this basin has ever seen, at least from the oil and gas industry. While much of this is more appropriate for that OGDP discussion next week, we want to point out that this injection well, even by itself, helps us achieve the goal of being safe, secure, and quiet disposal. So as a well thought out proposition, we also participate in the AQCC rulemakings, also the EPA rulemakings, just to make sure we were available to other operators, to those governing bodies, to make sure we're doing our part to reduce Colorado's contribution to our collective air. So safety and welfare, I would like to direct you to our forms 31, 33, and also our forms 2A, B, and C that highlight the moving parts, if you will, of getting this OGDP operational. We're proud to say the OGLA found no significant issues other than a few what we would consider standard BMPs to mitigate light, mitigate sound, which also happy to report are naturally mitigated because we're out in the sticks a bit. So we're not close to any highways, no population centers, and no high priority habitat. We've met with Rio Blanco not only in our regular course of development discussion, but also on siting to make sure this location is not one that would create any conflict with their other governing needs in the county. So lastly on this would be the environment and wildlife resources, and perhaps the most important for this type of application. And in this conversation with Commissioner Nanjapa-Gon, we were definitely in your capable hands, but we want to make sure we expand that conversation here to get everything on the table. But first and most importantly, again, this is a recycled site. That's probably just the best way to say it. There's not nearly as much dirt being turned for a location that would normally house an injection facility like this. Next, the location has proximity to our existing produced water infrastructure and the forthcoming water recycling facility, OGDP. You were first introduced to this closed loop idea a few times. With the mission change rulemaking, we had a great discussion about the recycling needs for oil and gas overall, but particularly in this basin, and we adjusted some of the rules. Thank you very much for that, to make sure that this type of creativity can happen. You also heard a presentation about water recycling think it was about 4 or 5 months ago now. But thank you for that ongoing conversation, and we're seeing that first application here. But again, this OGDP is the terminus of that system, and one that will allow us to process that E&P waste and accommodate that whole closed loop. But that gets us to trucking, really, this insurance policy, that has us protecting the environment, we think, as well as possible. In year one alone, we safely estimate about 1,548 truck trips that'll be eliminated against what would traditionally be expected to be used for an injection well site of this size. Now, keep in mind, that's only the terminus side of things. That's not the truck trips that will be saved for grabbing new water for use because of this whole closed loop system. And so this equates to savings also of 312,000 miles from large diesel trucks and 1,248,300 pounds of CO2 not emitted into the environment. Not to sound macabre, but getting large trucks off the roads is out in Rio Blanco County is safer for the deer and other wildlife. Just want to point out. And we also critically recognize that this location should be repurposed since it's safely outside of any sage grouse buffer. So thanks to Rio Blanco, CPW, and BLM for consultations there. And lastly, and on that note, this location is over 2,000 feet from any high priority habitat. So real quickly, the engineering testimony presented before you certifies the retooling of the existing pad, existing access road, existing water pipeline system for the protection of public health, safety, welfare, and the environment. And thankfully, no need to analyze complex drainage radii, horizontal spacing, heel-toe measurements, just kind of good old-fashioned pad development, making sure it is serving the purpose which is intended to be. Interestingly, Geology and Geoscience, you will see a rather detailed report in our submissions, and particularly in forms 31, 33. Again, we know the geology here quite well, and I say that because the published data for this immediate area goes back to 1969 and has been tracked throughout the development of the Williams Fork. We know there have only been 4 seismic events since 1969. Okay, 6, but the other 2 are projects Rulison and Rio Blanco, and that's kind of its own situation there that was induced by the Fed, but only 4, and all 4 of those are believed to be from the natural faulting that occurs in the stratigraphy here, so not from any induced seismicity. And lastly, land, again, just to recap, we're on federal lands here using our federal lease and a right-of-way granted by the BLM. So now I want to reintroduce to you Mr. Jeff Kirtland. He's the regulatory manager for TEP. He's going to address a few questions that are anticipated by you. And thank you for your time so far. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Joel, and good morning, commissioners. Again, thank you for your time and for your consideration this morning. Ms. Larson actually did provide us with a couple of questions, and what I'll do here is just read those questions if you're okay, and then respond accordingly. Really, there's 2 sets. We can sort of open it up then after we walk through this. And these were really good questions, so very, very much appreciate those. So first here, the question was, can produced water that is injected underground seep into adjacent underground water? How is that prevented? Is this not a concern because testing shows surrounding underground water aquifers have high TDS? And TDS is total dissolved solids, and that's the metric that we evaluate the salinity of water relative to drinking water protection. And what I'll say is that, geologically speaking, this really is not a concern, as Mr. Jewell alluded to. We know the geology very well. The Williams Fork formation, which is what we're proposing to inject into, is essentially the same formation that much of the water that is being injected from our wells will be injected back into. So that's where that water originated from. And there are, of course, similar levels of total dissolved solids, or TDS. With respect to the question about seepage, the geology here has really some advantages. There are actually 2 geologic confining layers that are above the Williams Fork Formation, which is our target formation. So these are layers of rock that has developed over millions of years that effectively holds the water that's entrapped in that Williams Fork Formation and continues to hold that in there. And in addition to that, there's a very tight pore space, and I'll bore you with microdarcies and the science and mathematics around that. But effectively, there are very tight pore space in the Williams Fork Formation that traps that naturally occurring water, preventing the underground water to seep into adjacent underground water. And again, these formations were formed over millions of years ago. They have trapped effectively a prehistoric ocean and decaying organic material within the pores of these rocks, which make them good for production as well as for injection. And again, this is really our target formation, which is an ideal candidate for returning the produced water that we take up from producing wells and returning it back to the original location. Further as identified by our geologist and verified by your staff in review of our Form 31 and Form 33, this area of the basin is ideal due to the absence of shallow faults, which are typically the contributor and usually the pathway between deep and shallow formations and groundwater. And that's where there's a lot of concern about groundwater contamination and the intermix of high salinity or hydrocarbon bearing fluids with drinking water. Further, the area surrounding the proposed injection well includes 6 existing injection wells which inject into the same formation. So there is a bit of a history. Additionally, just to add a little bit more to protection and trying to answer these questions, this well, this federal RG 912-23-299D, is designed with 3 strings of casing and cement to ensure that all formations to the surface are fully isolated from the proposed disposal zone in the Williams Fork. And I'll mention this is a departure from the typical 2-string wellbore design that is prevalent in this area. The operators prior to TEP designed 2-string wells. We felt that based on our geologic analysis, it would be more protective and provide us with a more a better well with better integrity if we designed it as a 3-string well. So this allows for better isolation and much more protection from shallow water zones. And as noted, and I won't go into the details, but effectively we will set 3 strings. That would be a surface casing, an intermediate casing, and then what we call the production string, which obviously we're not producing, we are injecting. The injection zone, and I'll mention those casings of protection will be set at about 3,146 feet, which is above the confining layers, to isolate where we'll actually be proposing to inject, which is about 5,200 feet to 6,300 feet. So there is quite a distance between where we are injecting and where those isolations and confining layers occur. I know that was a little overly technical, so I'll jump quickly to the next question if you're okay, and then we can open it up from there. Next question, in TEP's presentation, can they go through the steps that will occur with the produced water coming from other wells and delivered at Mott's Ranch, which we identified as the main location where the injection well will get water to be injected, how it gets processed, so hydrocarbons are separated out, and how the treated produced water is delivered via pipeline to the new injection well. Quickly, what I'll say is that production for all wells in the Piceance Basin, including the Ryan Gulch field, are first processed through well pad separators, which separates natural gas, heavier natural gas liquids, and produced water. Natural gas is then piped obviously through gathering lines for processing, and then the natural gas liquids are typically stored in tanks prior to being sold and trucked to the refineries. Finally, produced water, the subject that we're interested in here today, which really contains smaller traces of hydrocarbons, because we want to produce those hydrocarbons. We want to sell those hydrocarbons. So our goal is to remove those as much as possible at the location. But that water is piped or trucked to our produced water recycling facilities for further processing and recycling or injection. So at the Mott's Ranch facility, where produced water from Ryan Gulch is currently managed, there are at least 4 stages involved in the typical treatment of produced water. As water is piped into those facilities, they first pass through a combination of tanks and gun barrel tanks, usually up to 2 times, to remove hydrocarbons and natural gas liquids. After that, the water passes through a level control water settling tank, or what we call surge tanks, that further separates the heavier liquids from produced water before entering into the recycling pits. And as you recall, and as Mr. Yule alluded to, it was in October, I think we shared some information about our water recycling processes in a presentation. And I hope you recall that the way we treat water and remove hydrocarbons in our pits is with the introduction of beneficial microbial bacteria, which are effectively trained. We sort of say they're trained like circus bugs in a way, but these bugs and this bacteria is actually trained to consume trace amounts of hydrocarbons within the produced water in our pits. And that treatment does not remove the natural occurring salts, but that bacteria does result in improved emissions and odors emitted from those recycling pits. But finally, that clean produced water is then either piped to new locations for hydraulic completion operations. That's where the recycling occurs. Or if there's an excess of produced water, it is piped into the injection wells and pumped through a series of filters. So before it goes into an injection well, we filter from a 10 micron to a 5 micron and then to a 1 micron before injecting that water into the well. And as noted prior, this water is effectively being returned back to where it originated from in the formations that it was produced. So it's really in our best interest to remove as much of the hydrocarbon as possible for both an environmental and a monetary responsibility perspective. This process is anticipated to be improved in our upcoming OGDP application. One additional note, each injection well is permitted with a maximum surface pressure and maximum total volume that's allowed in the pore space. So this max pressure ensures that water that's pumped into the formations does not overpressure the formation, and also that the total volume is effectively capped for the amount of water that an operator can pump into an injection well. So hopefully that answers those 2 series of questions. I don't know, Mr. Gill, if you have any more comments, otherwise we certainly can open it up for questions at this point. And I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jeff. I think that's what we have, and right at 20 minutes or so of technical discussion, but we want to make sure we got the points across, mainly about the choice of location, that the location itself is recycled, if you will, being repurposed, but also the conversations with BLM and our care to our public health, safety, welfare, and environment. So we'll leave it to you guys now if there are any other questions you might have. Thank you for your time so far.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. Thank you, Mr. Kirtland. Appreciate the ability that we've provided in our system to be able to sort of review application materials and then lodge initial questions so that you can be prepared. And I think you did a good job with that. Appreciate my fellow commissioners for lodging said questions and getting some answers. Are there other questions from commissioners at this time from the presentation or from the Q&A we've already had? Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for answering the questions. I like to submit my stuff ahead of time so that you know what I have questions about. So
it's efficient.
I appreciate you digging in and providing the additional detail. And I'm someone who learns by hearing things multiple times and seeing them multiple times. So it was very helpful for me to for you to go through again what was happening at the recycling location. And I'm appreciative that we're talking about recycling the water and using it again when possible, and then reducing truck traffic, et cetera, by piping it back and injecting. Can you remind me, I can't remember if in your application you said, I think you said that there will be future wells also using this site. Do you know, like in general, how many would be able to use this process that you're creating?
Sure. I'll thank you for the question, Commissioner McGowan, and I'll take a stab at responding to that. As we're planning future development, we are recognizing that we need additional capacity. So, we've got several years of drilling, and you'll see future applications for, well pads. And I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I think initially you're going to see probably 2 and then an additional 2 number of pads ranging in the about 170 wells that we'll see probably in the next 2 years. And what we typically do and what you've seen in our applications is that we install pipelines from those well pads, from those from the tanks on pad to then be piped directly to these facilities. And again, you'll see an application next week that will be vital to this development project. And that facility allows us a couple things. That allows us to reuse the water that's produced from these new wells. But as development sort of continues, we also know that we'll see additional water that we have to manage, and that's why this injection well is very vital. As I noted, we do have existing injection wells that are there, but as we look toward this future development, we'll see a need there. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad that you're thinking ahead and we'll be able to take advantage of potential reuse of water, which I think is obviously super important for so many of us. And then reducing truck traffic, I think, is important too, especially since you've got some great wildlife in that area. And so it was an interesting application. Thanks for providing that information.
Thank you for the question.
Other commissioners with questions? All right, seeing none, I do note that Ms. Trask has visualized herself. Good morning. Did you want to bring anything into play here?
I do. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to just give a very brief comment. And I apologize, there's like landscapers outside, so if it's noisy, I can repeat anything. The director recommendation that we published does have a comment that says no additional revisions will be made to the application prior to the commission hearing scheduled for today. I just wanted to put forward for the record that staff did identify sort of a small single line item issue in the waste management plan. And so we did swap out that waste management plan with a revised waste management plan that simply clarifies a waste stream disposal option. Specifically to clarify that cuttings trenches, which are defined in our 100 series rules, cuttings trenches can only receive dried cuttings generated through the drilling process and will not receive other forms of E&P waste. So it's a literally like a one-line revision to the waste management plan. I just wanted to make that present that here for the record today. We did swap that plan out on the Form 2A.
Mr. Jewell, Mr. Kirtland, you're in agreement there?
Yes, we are. We had discussions yesterday, and thank you for bringing that forward, Ms. Trask.
Thank you, Ms. Trask. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. With that edification, any additional questions, commissioners? Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No question, just a comment, and then I'll make a motion. I will know. I want to express some appreciation to both TAP and staff for the application. I found the application to be super easy to read. The information that I needed was there. I particularly like the plan of development that TEP provided to give me a general overview of all the different elements that I needed to look at within the application. And so I thought it was well organized. I will note that unlike some applications that we've seen, it doesn't indicate that this one ever went back to draft before completion was determined. And so that's a big deal as far as efficiency goes. And so appreciate that. And so with that, I'll move approval of docket number 211-200-238.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. We look forward to, I think, seeing you again next week.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate it. And again, 8 days. See you right here.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Okay, very good. Hearings Manager Larson, are you with us?
Mr. Chair, I am. Apologies.
Okay,
It took me a while to get
just-
off mute.
Just checking. We need to break until 1 at this point because St. Croix is
Yes.
ready to go at 1.
Yes.
Okay. All right. With that, commissioners, we have one other item on our agenda. And that item we will hear at 1 o'clock. So we have a little bit of a longer break. We will go on standby and we'll see everybody at 1 o'clock. All right, we are back on the mic. Recording is in progress. And this is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. We have one docket item this afternoon. It's docket 2109-00146. An OGDP called Vaquero Oil and Gas Development Plan, and it is with St. Croix Operating Incorporated. We do not have public comment signed up for this, so I believe at this time we will hear a presentation from St. Croix.
Trying to get some volume.
We can hear you, Mr. Chapman. We cannot see you.
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay.
All right, can you hear us? Can you see us?
We can hear you. We cannot see you, but we can see your screen, which is probably more important than seeing you.
Oh, there you go. I think you got it.
Now I can
Good,
see you.
Andy. Give us just a moment here.
Okay.
Why is this? Can we go off the phone?
Did you need anybody other than Mr. Peterson elevated?
No, that's it. Can we go off the phone? Is the volume great? Yeah, try that. Can you, how about now? All right, Andy, could you just give us a quick sound check here?
Radio check,
Someone-
1, 2, 3.
All right, great.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Thank you. We were connected to the speakers on a display, which was kind of faint, but we heard that perfectly. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Troy Chapman, attorney for St. Croix, and today you will hear from representatives of St. Croix regarding St. Croix's oil and gas development plan in Washington County. St. Croix has engaged with Washington County community members and leaders and commission staff about the proposed development. St. Croix received no petitions or public comment regarding the Vaquero oil and gas development plan. However, before we delve into the specifics of the Vaquero OGDP, St. Croix would like to address an issue that commission staff previously raised concerning its proposed Vaquero OGDP potentially being an enhanced oil recovery project. St. Croix addressed the issue with commission staff at a meeting on March 25th, and the issue was resolved with staff concluding that the Vaquero OGDP did not have the potential for EOR. St. Croix is aware that commission staff withdrew its request for a commission determination on the EOR matter. However, in the March 25th meeting, St. Croix, or rather, commission staff requested and St. Croix agreed to provide and present information that it shared with commission staff as part of our presentation at today's hearing. So we're going to proceed with that. We'll keep it, pretty short, sweet, and concise. I will now hand things off to Andy Peterson, consulting petroleum engineer, to present these materials.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Next slide, please. And this one, thank you. So as Mr. Chapman said, in Friday's meeting, the staff in St. Croix discussed the concerns raised in the director's final recommendation for approval concerning EOR, the EOR matter, and asked for clarification from St. Croix, and it's my job to provide that clarification. And I'd like to thank John Morgan for his excellent summary of EOR matters that you heard this morning, because that makes things easier. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, St. Croix did not and does not believe, did not intend for the Vaquero project to be presented as an EOR project, doesn't believe it has potential for an EOR project. And I'll just quickly go through the reasons why that we shared with staff. So in this case, there are three primary mechanisms or characteristics that would be applicable to a successful EOR project. First, that there's structural conductivity or structural continuity or a direct pathway between the injection well and the producing well. Second, that there actually is some movable oil that can be displaced from the injector to the producer. And third, that once the investment is made and the project begins, that a successful EOR project would provide an economic return in a reasonable time frame. And that time frame varies, but there needs to be a return, and it needs to occur in a reasonable time frame. So to summarize, there's got to be continuity between the injector and the producer. There needs to be movable oil, and things have to occur in an economic time frame. So in the next slide, I'll start discussing why St. Croix doesn't feel that the Vaquero OGDP meets those characteristics. So this map is a seismic time map generated from a seismic survey. In a seismic survey, compression waves are applied at the surface, and they go down through the ground just like ripples in a pond spread out. Each formation boundary in the subsurface sends a reflection back, and the seismologists record those reflections, clock the time at which they come back, and generate what's in this case a time structure map, which is essentially can be viewed as a subsurface topographic map. So it's a map of the formations, in this case the J-sand formation, the objective formation, a map of what it looks like, what its peaks and valleys look like in the subsurface. The red and orange areas are high spots. The green and blue areas are low spots, or like valleys. And the yellow is in between, sort of a saddle or an in-between elevation. So you'll see the Vaquero #1. Again, this is a proposed vertical 4,000 some foot J-sand well drilled to test among other things, this seismic theory that there is a structure at this location. First and foremost, in exploring in Washington County, you have to find topographic highs for the oil to accumulate, because as Mr. Morgan said, oil is less buoyant than water. And so we're first and foremost looking for high spots. So you can see the Vaquero's on a fairly significant red spot. That's a peak. The disposal well off to the northeast, about a 1/4 mile, is on a orange spot. That's a lower relief structure, possibly 20 feet or so low to where the Vaquero #1 is estimated to encounter the J sand at. But significantly, not directly on the flanks of what St. Croix believes to be the Vaquero structure. And that's instructive because in the sense that all the examples Mr. Morgan presented, the 3 examples in the state of Colorado of successful EOR projects, the injectors and the producers were directly contiguous or on the same producing structure as one another. The injectors and producers, there was a direct pathway from one to the other. Now, in this case, based on this seismic interpretation, St. Croix does not feel there's a direct pathway. Anything ejected at the disposal well would #1 radiate out, then #2 get down into a saddle between the 2 structures, and there'd be very little. You can't make a good case that there's a direct pathway for injected fluids from the disposal well location over to the Vaquero OGDP. So criteria #1, direct structural continuity, is not satisfied, at least in St. Croix's understanding of the subsurface. Criteria #2, the presence of movable oil. When the Young disposal well, the 31-11350, was drilled in 2005, they ran open hole logs on it. Those logs show conclusively there is no movable oil in that wellbore or in the vicinity of that well. As a result, the Young was never production tested in the J. It was briefly tested in the Niobrara, but never was production tested in the J because there's no oil apparent in that wellbore. So in a successful EOR project, in this analysis, criteria #2 would be there's a bank of movable oil that the disposal or injection well gets drilled into, and then it pushes that oil over to the producer. So we don't believe it satisfies our criteria #2 in that we don't see any oil in the vicinity of the Young disposal well. Criteria #3, an economic time frame for all of this to occur. Engineers calculate disposal or injection radiuses and times with a simple calculation, taking the height of the injection interval, the porosity or pore space or holes between the rocks, between the sand grains in the injection interval, the amount of water available for disposal, and you run a simple radial flow calculation, figuring the size of the cylinder of displaced water essentially that's radiating out from your injection or disposal well. So in this case, given the large thickness of the J sand in the Young well, the high porosity in the in the Young well, and then the low amount of disposal or injection water volume available to St. Croix to put into the Young well, it would take over 100 years for fluids to get from the disposal well to the site of the Vaquero #1. So that's the 3rd criteria that St. Croix does not believe is met to classify this as an EOR project, and certainly not as a successful EOR project. Next slide, please. So as was stated, we had a meeting with staff, discussed all of the previous stuff, and at the conclusion of the meeting, staff agreed that it doesn't have the potential for an enhanced recovery project and therefore would not be a suitable EOR project. Mr. Morgan did ask that a BMP be imposed on the Young SWD well such that its injection volume would never be allowed to exceed the currently permitted 1/4 mile radius or approximate 11.2 million barrel cumulative injection limit. St. Croix has no objection to that whatsoever, and an updated Form 4 to that effect was entered into the Young SWD file via e-form after that meeting. Next slide, please. I believe that concludes my portion of the testimony. I know you have questions. I went through it pretty quickly. If you have anything on this specifically, be happy to talk about it now.
All right, I think you can keep going.
All right, good deal. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
So we'd like to now transition to the specifics of the Vaquero Oil and Gas Development Plan. Next, you will hear from Paul Melenchenko, President of St. Croix and professional geologist.
Thank you. St. Croix Operating was founded in 1996. We have operated in Colorado, Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming. More recently, we focused our operations in Colorado in Washington County. We currently operate 5 producing wells, and we're focused on operating in a manner that protects public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. We have a good rapport with Washington County leaders and community members. We are planning a 4,000-foot vertical J-sand test. There is no directional horizontal component of this. We will not be fracking this well. We are drilling in a agricultural field, going to be planted in corn here around May, early May. There's pictures there on the lower right. And as you can see, it's pretty far away from anything. And we are also under a crop circle on the upper right photo. St. Croix will use the Young disposal well to dispose of water and also house the production facilities at that location. Next slide, yeah. There's the crop circle or the pivot. All right. We're greater than 1 mile away from a residential building, high occupancy building, school, childcare, pretty much anything out there. Greater than 1 mile from a house. Just off the county road, and the production facilities again will be centered around the disposal well, away from the well site. Next one.
All right, you'll now hear from Jessica Donahue, regulatory compliance specialist, to discuss location details further.
Good afternoon, commissioners. As Paul mentioned, we are proposing the Vaquero #1. It is a conventional vertical single oil well pad. The initial disturbance will be approximately 7.57 acres. Once the well is drilled and on production, it will be undergo reclamation immediately since it is in an agricultural field, and it should be brought down to approximately 0.02 acres of disturbance for long term. All production facilities will be located at the existing Young injection well site. There will be an off-location flow line that will be installed to connect the wellhead to the production facilities at the Young location. So the only thing left on the Vaquero pad itself will be the wellhead. So this is an approximate schedule of the development for the Vaquero. The construction will take approximately up to 7 days to construct the pad. Drilling of the vertical well will be only about approximately another 7 days. This is a very conventional, traditional well that will be done. So the busiest part of the activities will be within about a 2-week time frame. And then, as we mentioned, we have an agreement, St. Croix has an agreement with the surface owner so that once the well has gone to production, they will start planting that this spring, and the drilling pad will be brought down to the long-term production location. Throughout the permitting process, St. Croix has developed several best management practices with COGCC staff. We have them listed here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but we just wanted to highlight that while we are not in high priority habitat at the Vaquero location, we did consult with staff and discuss some wildlife BMPs to have in place. Also, things like the noise mitigation, emissions mitigation. St. Croix will have the emissions air monitoring on location pre and post production. In this area, traditionally, there is not a lot of natural gas anticipated to be found in the well, but St. Croix has developed a gas capture plan with staff to address those incidents should there be natural gas discovered while they're drilling. Obviously, material handling and liquids will be in compliance with Rule 6030. Everything will be within secondary containment. For dust mitigation, they will limit the speed limits on the roads. They will have fresh water that they will use for dust mitigation. Stormwater, obviously, you know, we are very concerned with making sure that the soil doesn't leave location and ensuring that the agricultural field will be viable for a long time for the surface owner. So we will have stormwater best management practices in place in accordance with the surface owner to make sure that the field is protected. And then also during our discussion last week with COGCC staff, we did also commit to that we will not request an increase on the injection volume currently allowed at the Young injection well. And with that, one other point that we did want to address is that during technical review, staff had requested they had proposed a potential condition of approval. They wanted to see the proposed equipment layout for the Young location with the addition of the Vaquero supporting equipment. That diagram has been submitted via Form 4 sundry. So this was taken care of. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. David Olds.
Thank you. Next slide. I'm David Olds. I'm a petroleum landman. I've worked with St. Croix since 1993, especially out in Washington County. And anyway, St. Croix has acquired leases on 87.5% leasehold interest in the DSU. And it's all 100% fee minerals as well as the surface. We have arrangements with the surface owners who are really excited about our project, and we've arranged for surface use, timing, and drilling. And the surface owners are in full support of everything that we're doing out there. The current surface land use is agriculture. As you know, it's an irrigated crop circle, and you know, it's going to work out really well with the service owners that we're going to be able to get the well drilled, and then they can plant their corn. So we're good to go. I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Dave. I guess some reiteration. Our proposed well at 4,000 feet will test the J sand, Cretaceous J sand. It's about 30 feet thick. That cross section on the upper right shows that we're trying to gain structure in between two dry holes where the oil is entrapped. The lower left diagram is a structure map made off of well control at a 20-foot contour interval. We are hoping for a structural high and oil accumulation at the Vaquero #1. Andy?
In this part of my engineering testimony, I examined the producing J sand wells in the area to calculate their drainage radius, much the same way I talked about that cylinder of injection. There's a cylinder of production that we can calculate to show that a well in this DSU will not drain an area larger than the proposed DSU. And the average drainage radius for a similar J sand well in this part of Washington County is a little over 9 acres, 353-foot drainage radius. So one well drilled in this DSU, no less than 600 feet from the unit boundary, will not drain an area larger than the proposed DSU.
Thanks, Andy. All right, are there any questions about any of the materials that were presented to you today?
You, Mr. Chapman. Before we go into questions, I want to have Sabrina Trask elevated. Good afternoon, Ms. Trask. I understand that you and your team met with St. Croix last Friday to receive additional information about the EOR concern. And then obviously they just presented said information to us today. Wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in and clarify staff's perspective on the EOR issue.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Robbins. St. Croix did reach out to us last week and we were able to meet with them fairly late on Friday. I do appreciate that they wanted to discuss this further prior to the hearing. They were able to provide us some additional seismic data, basically the information that was presented here today in their presentation. John Morgan, our UIC lead, and Diana Byrne, one of our engineering supervisors, were also in attendance in this meeting to give sort of their perspective from an engineering and UIC perspective. So St. Croix was able to walk us through this data similarly to how they've done in their presentation today. And after some discussion and some clarifying questions, both John Morgan and Diana Byrne were reasonably convinced that this project is truly not enhanced oil recovery. So staff feels very comfortable that this project should not be considered for EOR at this point. The data was very specific to the geology proposed, or the geology at the proposed Vaquero well site and the Young injection site. So it was helpful for us to have St. Croix really walk us through that additional data. I believe that that data will be incorporated into the Form 2A. If St. Croix could just confirm, I know that we have it here in the presentation, but I would like to attach that specific map, the seismic map, onto the Form 2A with your permission. And then to the BMPs, the two BMPs, St. Croix has submitted a couple of Form 4 sundries as requested by staff. A sundry was submitted for the Young SWD injection location to update the equipment count and the well pad diagrams. A second sundry was submitted also for the Young injection location to confirm through the BMP that the injection volume will not be increased beyond that as allowed on the approved injection permit. Both of those sundries have been reviewed by staff and have been approved. I believe that John Morgan, our UIC lead, is available on this in the hearing to answer any questions that the commissioners may have about staff's conclusion that this is not an EOR project.
And with the conclusion that it's not an EOR project, is the staff recommendation that this meets our rules and is recommended for approval?
Yes. Yes, that is correct. Staff believes that this OGDP is compliant with all rules and should be considered for approval.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Trask, for being with us. Commissioners, we are now at that stage in the game in which we get to ask questions. Now that we've had the clarification from staff, do we have questions? Not seeing questions, which means applicant did a good job. Appreciate staff's coming back and providing information to us. At this point, we would be at deliberations. Does anyone desire to initiate deliberations and or a motion?
Chair, I'll move to approve this OGDP.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. AAG Mercer, do you want to show up? Do we need to do anything with those Form 4s with regard to the motion?
So thank you, Chair Robbins. I would just make clear on the record that the motion for approval includes the BMPs that were noted on those Form 4s. And I think that takes care of it.
So having said that, are we good to go?
Yes, Chair Robbins.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Chapman, and to your team. We have approved the oil and gas development plan.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, with that, I believe we have made our way through our agenda for today. Does any commissioner have anything further? If not, I think we're looking for a motion to disband.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Take care, everybody.